Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Marcus Rongowhitiao Shadbolt tōku ingoa. My name is Marcus Rongowhitiao Shadbolt, as I was introduced. Ki te tā o tōku mama, ko te aroa, nā te kahanunu, nā te parau, nā iwi. Ki te tā o taha o tōku pāpā, ko nai tahu te iwi. Kia ora, everybody. My name is Marcus Rongowhitiao Shadbolt. I'm a master's student at the University of Canterbury at the moment, working on seed banking methods for our coprosma species. For those of you who don't know what the coprosma species are, that's species like mingi mingi and kanono, and how we store those technically, as well as how we store them culturally, appropriately, and ethically. A lot of that stuff we'll be hearing about today from the other speakers, but today my talk is just to sort of get us in the mood for today's kōrero, and to set the scene for the day. So I'd just like to preface that firstly with sort of how TTW became involved in the seed space. So we first became involved in this area when myrtle rust hit in 2017. Since then we have run trainings both locally as well as sending our Māori communities overseas to Kew Gardens in the UK to do a number of seed training programs there. And we've also resourced many kaitiaki on the ground with basic seed collection kits and our seed drums that some of you may have seen around the motu. And we have big aspirations for the future of Māori seed banking in New Zealand, again, some of which you'll hear some more of today. I'm very excited to hear from our speakers today. As you'll see on the agenda, we're going through a range of topics regarding our taonga seeds and seed banking in general. We'll be hearing about the state of our knowledge, what we do know and what we don't know so far, as well as how to connect projects across our communities through tools like Michael's map that he's pointed out. And from this, we can begin to have some discussions later in the day about where we want to get to next and what we want to accomplish. Today, I'll be going over why this kaupapa is so important and why we need to be having these conversations. As we all know, climate change and the destruction of our ecosystems are not issues that are going away anytime soon. We are currently undergoing the greatest loss of species and ecosystems in our short history, and the fallout is already showing to be huge. Climate change, as we all know, leads to an increase in disasters. Here I have pictures of 4 disasters that have happened in New Zealand in the last few years. Every single one of these can be related to climate change and is related to climate change. We will see increased fires, as you can see here in the Port Hills fires. We will see more flooding, as we've very recently seen, and we will even see more volcanic eruptions and more earthquakes, as research is beginning to show us. We only need to look locally, as you can see here, to see that these disasters will get worse, and internationally it's worse. These disasters lead to loss of life, food, and resources for us. As farmlands are destroyed, the question arises of how do we, on one hand, prevent these disasters happening in the first place and build our resilience to them, but when they do happen, how do we rebuild? We know how to build houses, we know how to build buildings. Every disaster, our codes get a little better, but our farming doesn't tend to keep to the same standards. We don't always have the seeds needed to replant and rebuild. We don't always have the resources at hand. One of the questions that comes from this, that some of us will talk about today as well, is food diversity. Do we have enough different seeds available to us? When these disasters happen and environments change, do we have the right foods and the right crops and seeds and plants available to us to be able to rebuild sustainably? And where do we get seeds from? Are we sourcing them from the same places all the time? And are we bringing them from the right place to the right place? Are we collecting in Northland and planting in Southland? Or are we keeping seeds where they're from and where they work best? And the effects of climate change don't stop with disasters either. As weather changes, so too does the spread of disease and pathogens. Myrtle rust and Kōrero dieback have proven huge challenges within our ngāhere, and the destruction from them has been and will continue to be huge. While in industry we see things like PSA moving across the border, which crippled the kiwi fruit industry when it first arrived. More diseases will come. The lines that are drawn by these diseases historically and biologically will change, and they will go to new places and infect new things. Seed banking, again, provides an opportunity to begin to start preparing for these and making sure that we have those backups in place. We see even more examples of how our ever-changing world brings new threats. COVID was a result of changing environments as cities spread too wide and global poverty increases. The fruit fly being an ever-worrying incursion, as too is Mycoplasma bovis reinfection, as we only now move to extinction of it. Seed banking provides an opportunity to create backups of our plants so that if the worst does come to worst, our taonga are not lost. It also allows us to replant much quicker after disasters by having the required seeds ready to go. Seed banking, therefore, will be vital for the future success of our natural world. As wars increase, climate change worsens, new pathogens emerge and old ones move, it is more important than ever to be preparing for these new futures. But as we begin to discuss seed storage, however, questions begin to emerge. Who will run and operate these programs that are set up? Will it be government programs, CRIs? Will Māori as a collective run these programs? Will iwi Māori run these? Hapu Māori? Is it down to the individual? These are questions that we don't have the answers to yet, and conversations that need to be had early. The system has already begun to splinter across these, as I'm sure our map will start to reveal. There are seed banks run through Massey University, there are government seed banks run, Ag Research hosts one of them, and Māori have nurseries all over the country. It's a fractured system already, and we don't know what the answers are going to be to where this stuff goes. We don't know who is already doing stuff, and again, that builds on this mapping that we're trying to get started through what Michael spoke about. Who will exert ownership over seeds and control where they go? Who has that ability? One of the most common practices among seed banks is what's known as the black box policy. So that is simply he who deposits withdraws. If DOC do a collection on behalf of Te Arawa, for example, and deposit that, Te Arawa can't withdraw those seeds when they decide to. That power, that control sits with DOC. So how do we address these concerns? What are the systems we may move to? And how do we do it? Do we know how to store our native seeds, is one of the talks we'll be hearing about today from Sarah Wise, who's also one of my supervisors at UC, both technically and culturally. So do we know how to technically store these seeds, and do we culturally know how to store them? Do we know what the right way is, what the tika way is to do this? Do we sort by their taxonomy when we put them into these banks, or do we sort them by waka or iwi, hapu, location? Do we sort them by their whānau in the forest, by their whakapapa to the rest of the ngāhere? And what happens to the mauri of these seeds when they're stored? I remember a conversation recently I had with one of our TTW kaumātua, Tohi Ashby, where he spoke about how when we visited the Millennium Seed Bank in the UK, he saw that all the jars were clear glass, and they're clear glass so that you can see what's happening in the jar a lot easier, is the scientific purpose for them. But he noted that black glass was better. What he had seen in his experiences was that by having black glass there, the seeds are able to retain their modi, and it isn't lost through the glass. So these are some of the conversations that we're hoping to be able to have and things to learn to make sure that whatever system we do build is as good as it possibly can be. And there's many types of seed banking. It's not all seed banks and seed facilities are built the same. At the highest level, we have long-term storage. These tend to be hosted by CRIs or universities or sit within farming communities. And that tends to be what we think of when we think of seed banking, really. But it's also everything in between and below that. It's our living collections that we have. There are many seeds, as we'll hear about today, that simply won't be able to be stored anytime soon using traditional drying seed storage methods. So we need to have living collections of them. And even for those that can be stored, they still need to have turnover of that. So we still need areas where we can plant these seeds to get new seeds. So living collections and nurseries come under that too. And there are lots of people who do at-home storage. Seed banking, one of the beauties of it is it's quite a simple science for a lot of seeds. You can do it at home with a jar if you really want to. And so many people will be doing this already in their homes. So clearly it's important. So I just wanted to do a quick sort of run through of some of the biggest seed facilities around the world, and also some of the stuff that's going on locally. So who's doing it? Well, Wakehurst in the UK is home to Q's Millennium Seed Bank. They are the ones who sent us our seed drum kits that some of you may have received a number of years ago, and recently we, as a TTW crew, went over and visited. They are the largest seed bank in the world, and these are the numbers I currently have, and they may have increased since then, but they are home to 2.4 billion seeds across 39,000 different species. And so this is a huge facility that does have some New Zealand species there. Svalbard in Norway is known as the Seed Doomsday Vault. This is the one that tends to be in the media when this gets talked about. It's built into the permafrost in Norway, and is home to 642 million seeds, but across 1.1 million different varieties. This seed bank is built as, like I said, a doomsday vault. It's designed so that if the worst comes to worst, countries have a final backup of their seeds somewhere. There's only been one withdrawal made in 2017, I believe, by the Syrian government, as they sought to rebuild post-war. It seems likely that the next to withdraw from this vault will be the Ukraine. They had their seed bank destroyed last year in a Russian attack, and this will be the last refuge for a number of their seeds. So clearly seeds are incredibly important and hold the backbone of entire nations. New Zealand, if we ever reach one of these scenarios, if we get to one of these apocalyptic scenarios, it seems unlikely that we would be able to, A, get to Norway in a real endgame type situation, but it also seems unlikely that we'd be able to store enough seeds there to get any real short-term benefits out of a bank like this. So having local infrastructure spread across the country allows us to better prepare ourselves. So seed banking is undertaken here in Aotearoa across the agricultural sector mainly, but our only seed bank for Indigenous seeds is the New Zealand Indigenous Flora Seed Bank at the Mauro Ford Forage Germplasm Centre. This here on the slide is the species that they have listed on their website as their ones in storage. I couldn't, in my quick search, find anything more specific than this, but I'm sure it is out there. So they have a whole range of species there, but they very much don't have everything. This facility, I believe, also works on a black box policy. And so there are issues around that as well, and there are things that we'll need to work through. And if we are wanting to ensure that New Zealand has a culturally appropriate seed banking system going forward. And I just want to round off with my hopes for seed banking. So it's very well to talk about all these disasters and the things that are going wrong in the world and locally, but there is hope for the future. And so I've got a picture there of my wee Pepe Kaya there, because our hope is our future, and it is our children as they go forward. So my hopes are that Māori are able to lead research and storage of our taonga species. Nothing with us without it, nothing about us without us. And that we can proactively collaborate, that we can lean on these connections that we form all around the world, both with Indigenous communities and other organisations, to build the best system and networks that we possibly can, so that our taonga are treated as best as they possibly can. And that other rangatahi can get involved, that other young people can come into this space and become seed collectors and become researchers in this area and begin to understand how our seeds and our taonga work and how they best need to be treated, so that we can continue these good practices that we create into the future. There's really good work starting to happen, as we will be hearing about today, even if it does have a long and rough history associated with it. But there are very good people here that we will be hearing from today to talk about some of the good stuff that is starting to happen, and then also many of you online who we really want to hear from. So I strongly encourage you all to share your views throughout the day to shape what we do going forward in this mahi, and in turn we hope to support you with what you may want to do next. We want to be able to use the findings and the learnings we have from today to shape a better seed system going forward for all of us. So ngā mihi nui, thank you everybody.
Tēnā koe Marcus. Whānau, just while we're getting used to the technology, there is I'm looking at what hopefully the screen you guys can see here, and there's both a chat option and a Q&A option. If you've got any questions for Marcus, tēnā patopato mai, type them in there. By the way, the links that Michael was just talking about earlier, before Marcus, they're in the chat there as well. Ka pai and rima, whā, toru, rua, tahi. Nei ka mihi atu kia koe Marcus. The question that I had was really what you just answered. It's okay, that's cool for an aspiration, what's happening now, so it's great to see that something is. Mm-hmm. So thank you for your time for that whānau. We'll now take a kapa e te whānau, and then we'll reconvene at 10:40. So please don't go down the rabbit hole of checking your emails and coming back at 11 o'clock. Okay, so there is a question here. Can you please talk a bit more about your master's research? Sure.
Well, my master's project is two-parted. So the first part of it is I'm looking at the technical aspects of how do we store our coprosperous species. So like I said, Mingi and Kākano and some of those closely related species in a safe way that keeps those seeds as safe as they can within storage facilities. And then the other part of my work is looking at some technical protocols around how we can best look after our taonga, both when they're in storage, but also right from the beginning. So when we first collect them from the tree, the way we bring them into our lab environments, the way we treat them there, and then the way we store them. So ensuring that the protocols we use around collection are tika, and what that looks like.
Ka pai, kia ora, thank you for that. What's the name of the Māori Seed Bank again, please?
Of the Māori seed bank, there is no official Māori seed bank. The one I spoke about, the Indigenous Flora and Fauna Seed Bank, is a storage of indigenous plants, but it is hosted by Massey University and Ag Research.
Ka pai, tēnā he riro kia koutou e mātaki te kiana, tēnā whakarohia te ingoa Māori mo tēnei kaupapa.